Does it ever cross your mind a concern that you might fail as a parent and secretly wished that you can have some form of guarantee that you're going to be the best parent once you're a parent? So I'm Chani Twersky. I'm a mother of 8. And in the past 20 years, I've invested tens of thousands of hours to study childhood development, childhood trauma, and how to heal from that. Especially from my own personal life, I needed to do my own healing. And also as a mother of a large family, I wanted to be the best that I can be as a parent. And I will bring you the best that I have learned from all the trainings and all the practice that I have worked since 2011 when I started my parenting coaching practice. What I want to share with you today in this video are the 2 key generational cycles that I found to be the most important to be conscious about and hopefully be the transition person that can break the cycle and do things differently. And if that's you, and if you're interested to hearing more, stay till the end, because at the end, I'm going to share with you a very important tip that will help you get you started on that path right away. So let's begin. Let's start with the second most important generational cycle that you would want to be aware of and see if you can break that cycle. And I call that ignorant lack of responsibility. And why do I call it ignorant lack of responsibility? Because I believe it comes from ignorance, and that ignorance creates irresponsibility as a parent. And let me explain. Now, before I talk about breaking generational cycles, I want to take a moment and remind you that whenever I share anything to educate you, it's never about blaming the generations that came before us or judging them. It's only about education and to learn how to break the cycles that we don't want to repeat only because they were passed down to us. So let's understand this cycle that I call ignorant lack of responsibility. And how I understand it is that parents simply do not recognize the impact, the emotional impact that they have on their children, specifically on their very young children, from the moment they are born up until the age of about 7 and 8, where your child develops their own cognitive brain, and then they can begin to have some autonomy, some authority over their own life. But up until that time, they are completely subject to how they are treated by their parents. And when parents do not realize the measure of that impact, they fail to take responsibility over their role in their child's emotional experience. Because when parents are not aware, they can impact their child negatively simply by the lack of awareness, by their ignorance, by being reactive, emotionally reactive. They have a trigger. Maybe the child triggered them, maybe work triggered them, maybe their partner triggered them. Doesn't matter what the trigger was. The point is, they are not conscious that whatever their emotional reaction will be to the trigger, whether it's having a anger, temper tantrum, or yell, or be bitter, or whatever the situation, the reaction to the trigger is, the child is going to absorb that energy and take it in. They will absorb your reactivity, whether it's yelling, whether it's shaming. They will learn to retract themselves, to want to hide. If not physically, they will learn to do that energetically. And they will slowly shut down their true expression of what your child is capable of being and developing into. The second way parents can impact a child due to their ignorant lack of responsibility is their emotional absence. They are emotionally absent. The first one is more aggressive. The second one is more passive. So this second form is parents not paying attention to their child's emotional needs. There are a lot of parents who are very dedicated, put in a lot of effort in providing their child with their physical needs, clothing, and they take care of their health, they take care of their sleep and physical needs. However, because they are ignorant, they don't know that the child also has emotional needs, whether it's creating a connection with them, inquiring into their life and being a listening ear, showing interest in the child. These are some examples of a child's emotional needs. If the parent isn't educated enough and not aware enough of their impact on their child's emotional wellness, they will not know how to be emotionally present to the child, to tune into what the child's emotional needs are, and that can also leave a child with emotional neglect wounding. While we're on the subject of ignorant lack of responsibility, let's take a glance at a very common topic and debate in psychology called nature or nurture. Have you heard of that one? So if not, let me explain. When a child grows up behaving a certain way or creating a certain personality, the question in psychology is, what's dominant? The nature of how this child is formed into as a soul, as a separate being, or is nurture dominant? What they experienced in their life growing up, especially in the formative years, the first 7 years. Which one is dominant? That's the question. However, what this debate fails to address is something very obvious and important. And that is that it doesn't matter which one is dominant. Why not? Because what really matters is for you to understand your particular role in this debate as a parent. Where do you play a more important role? Do you play a more important role in the child's nature, or do you play a more important role in the child's nurture? And of course, the obvious answer to that is that you play an important role only in one of these two, which is nurture. You play no role in your child's nature. That's divine. However, we have a tremendous part in the child's nurture. So I want to ask you a question. Do you think if parents or aspiring parents understand this, understand their role in their child's nurture and their child's upbringing, in their child's formation, especially emotional formation, do you think they would do something about it? Do you think they would do something more about it? That's why I call it ignorant lack of responsibility. It's not that the generations before us were irresponsible necessarily. They did the best with what they knew. There's a saying, if you know better, you do better. And that's my invitation to you who are listening to this. I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge you taking the time to listen to this, taking the time to educate yourself in whatever form or way possible, so that you can break that cycle from ignorance to walking and stepping into your parenthood journey with education and understanding your role in your child's life. Let's quickly take a look at 3 common limiting beliefs that create this pattern of ignorant lack of responsibility. And the first one is a very old belief that I will learn on the job, especially when it comes to parenting. There are still, the majority of people believe that they will learn how to parent once they have a child. While it is partially true that there's nothing that teaches us as much as experience, however, anything serious in life, there is a learning and educational process that happens prior to the actual job. I'll compare it to, for example, being a doctor, especially let's say a surgeon. Would a surgeon be given a knife or access to an operating room if they never learned how to be a surgeon? They just want to come into the operating room. They're given a knife and they say, it's okay, I'm going to learn on the job. Well, of course, when you think about that, about a surgeon, you think it's ludicrous. That's why I call it ignorant, lack of responsibility, because it's, in a way, similarly irresponsible, because people don't know what their impact on their child is. So the good news is that there is a way to educate yourself. Now, the second limiting belief is that children will grow up fine, no matter what. I even hear people saying, look, I didn't have a good childhood and I turned out just fine. To some degree, that's true. We all turn out fine. And our journey includes exactly what we're meant to experience in our childhood. The flip of that is that there is a risk, because children do experience pain that is not necessarily necessary if only the parent is educated and the parent understands their personal role in this child's emotional experience, especially in that first period between 0 and 7 years of age. There's another thing here that I want to add, is that a lot of people, or most people, look fine on the outside, but it's not necessarily the truth of what is going on inside them. They're trying so hard to hold in and to hold down their true emotional turmoil. So while, yes, it's true we all turn out fine, it's not always necessarily so on the inside. And as healers, we all know that to be true, because these people come to us because they don't feel fine on the inside. Now, the third limiting belief is a little bit more subtle, and that is the belief to not think. Well, I'm just not going to think. And oftentimes it comes and it stems from not knowing what to think. Once again, there's a lot of grace sending to everybody who is believing any of these beliefs or been carrying these generational cycles, because it does come from ignorance. And when people know better, they do better. Before we move on to how to break the cycle, which I will share with you at the end, I want to move into the number one most important generational cycle that you would want to break. What is that? I call it false hyper responsibility, which is almost the flip of what we just discussed. Have you heard the saying, with every power comes responsibility, or with every superpower comes responsibility? Same is true with our parental role. Parenthood is an outstanding responsibility. And with that comes an outstanding power. I want you to pause a minute to think about the imbalance of power between parent and child. Just take a moment to think about that. The physical, the size of an adult parent. Hopefully, we're talking about adults and mature adults. And the size of an infant who is just born. The physical difference, the mental difference, the mental development of the adult compared to the mental unconsciousness of how we're born in this world. The emotional vulnerability. There's a tremendous imbalance of power between a parent and child, which is crucial to understand. There is someone divine who is entrusting you with a child and entrusting you with this massive responsibility. With every power comes responsibility. And there's no more imbalance in power than a parent and child. So you have been given this responsibility, trusting you that you will do justice to your power as a parent. What I want to address here is a little bit delicate, because this once again comes from a different angle of the ignorance, which is a false misunderstanding of this responsibility, which I call false hyper responsibility, which means where a parent assumes too much power, too much responsibility over their child, leaving limited room for the child to develop and become their own person. Let's unpack the root cause for false hyper responsibility. Where does this false hyper responsibility get developed in a parent? The first place where a parent picks up this false hyper responsibility as a parent, or too much power, is from a history of disempowerment. This becomes like a compensation for feeling helpless, powerless, weak, disempowered as a child. And that's, if you notice, that's the ripple effect. If this child's parents were hyper responsible, too controlling, as some people call it, then this child will feel intimidated by their parent, will feel disempowered, paralyzed, frozen, or whatever the reaction to their parents' false hyper responsibility, called control in some circles. And they compensate. When they grow into the adult, they repeat the pattern. And there's almost an unconscious sense of false hyper responsibility. It's a false sense of responsibility. Well, I'm the parent, so I'm responsible for this child. And this parent takes this responsibility over the edge. If there is too much responsibility, it's just as or more damaging than lack of responsibility, as we discussed earlier. Let's look together at another cause where they play out their parenting in a way of having this false hyper responsibility. It's a place where the causes a low self-esteem, which turns into a feeling of entitlement. In this place, in my home, in my family, I am the it factor. I am the parent. And there's almost like this unspoken demand for unreasonable bowing and serving the parent, which is so flipped from what parenthood is. Parenthood is service to a child, to help the child grow into the best version of themselves. And if this parent has not received that from their parent, this becomes a vicious cycle where the parent will claim the throne of entitlement in their home and expect unreasonable listening to me because I'm the parent, or exploiting the parent-child relationship in inappropriate ways. And while this is painful even to talk about, and I know it's delicate, I think it's important to talk about this. I think it's important to educate yourself and understand that this is dysfunctional. And if this is something you grew up with, I want to invite you to make room for the painful reality. If you are treated like that, that's unfair. It's unfair, it's dysfunctional, it's not parenthood. I once heard this from my mentor. I don't know if you heard of T. Harv Eker. He wrote the book Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. So I bought all his programs, part of my educational journey. I'll share a quote by him, which I think is very relevant here. He says, we're not born to our parents, we're born through our parents. So our parents don't own their children because they're their children. Yes, they came through you. There's a purpose, and it gives you an immense opportunity for personal growth. However, not to claim the throne as if we own our children. As a mother of 8, believe me, I needed to grow as a person to understand this on a complete, deeper, and different level. Because once you're a parent, we all have a human tendency to desire to manipulate and control and want our children to be the way we want them to be, or behave in the way that we want them to behave. But we don't have that right. We don't have that entitlement. It's not the truth. That brings me to the third aspect, which I call projection. False hyper-responsibility is when we have a false sense of responsibility and we project onto our child, whether it's a certain identity, which is not really who the child is, or we project a desire of how we want the child to grow up. We project our own values. We project. None of it is parental responsibility because it's false. Any projection rather than reality is dysfunctional. So are you ready to move into understanding what the risks are for repeating this generational cycle? So the first risk is risking the child growing up with childhood trauma. It could be traumatizing to a child when a parent is trying to impose their power over this super tiny, impressionable young being, undeveloped being. And I'm talking about 0 to 7 years of age, primarily. Of course, this can continue later on. But in that age, there's a great risk of childhood trauma. The second risk is squelching the child's potential. And that can be connected to their trauma, meaning they go into a fear response and they decide to hide their potential, hide their truth. So do you remember we spoke about nature and nurture? Ignorant lack of responsibility really fails to take responsibility on the nurture part. False hyper-responsibility trumps entirely the nature part. It squelches the child's innate nature because the child will learn to hide their true personality, hide their true potential, and play small, play safe, people please. So there is a great risk in really overpowering the truth of who your child potentially can be. The third risk is maybe an obvious one, which is that this child who is feeling disempowered in the face of their parent who is creating, maybe unconsciously, but creating through false hyper responsibility, creating this power struggle, trying to impose power over the child feels disempowered. What's the risk? You guessed right. The child will repeat the pattern almost inevitably because they will imprint in their brain that one day, yes, you guessed right, one day I will become a parent and I will have all that power. So how can we break the cycles? Let's go a little bit into the practical. Can we? Shall we? Number one, learn about the truth. The first way I would recommend for you to learn and educate yourself is from personal experience. Meaning, what was your experience? Learn from that. Understand your own experience, how you grew up in your childhood. Ask yourself, how did your parents impact your emotional wellness? And this might be a little bit difficult to educate yourself from personal experience, but it will be the most educational. The second way is talk to therapists or healers, because in every therapist office, the same cycle repeats itself with every client. It's all about healing from their childhood. Or if you want to educate yourself a little bit more, you want to learn about the truth, I'm inviting you to study the science, psychology, and study people like Bruce Lipton or philosophers like Rudolf Steiner, who both, among many others, believe that from conception up until around 7 years of age, a child is most impressionable, and anything a parent will do will leave a blueprint for this child for the rest of their life. So that's the first practical step. Learn about the truth. The second one is, which I feel the most important, and chances are you already begun that, which is healing. I think nothing, no education, will help you transform and break the cycle as much as going through actual healing. Whatever path you take to heal from your childhood traumas, childhood neglect, or however these patterns have impacted you as a child, when you go through a full inside-out healing, you will become a different person as a parent, and chances are that you will break those cycles most effectively. So I cannot say it enough times. Do the healing, do the healing, do the healing, do the healing, heal. And of course, the third step in breaking the cycle is radical commitment, radical responsibility, not ignorant lack of responsibility and not false hyper responsibility. The middle of that is radical parental responsibility and really committing to breaking the cycle, to becoming the parent you want deep, deep in your heart, the parent who wants the guarantee that you're going to be an amazing parent. That's the parent you want to exercise your radical responsibility. That responsibility will take you through the healing course, no matter how painful it could be. And I can say from personal experience that my healing journey has taken me to very painful places, very dark nights of the soul. And nothing has stopped me as a mother of 8 children to take that radical responsibility to become the best that I can be as a mother, taking that responsibility and committing to becoming your best as a parent. That's the third step that I want to encourage you in every way that I can to do that. We must break these cycles. Our children, our future generations deserve to have parents like you or aspiring parents like you take the radical responsibility and shift and flip those cycles on their head by educating yourself, by healing, by sharing, by spreading, by joining community and support systems, and mostly by really understanding your true role as a parent, truly understanding where your true parental power and responsibility lies. And now, as I promised, a bonus tip. Since you stuck around till the end, let me gift you with an incredible little gift wrapped in a bow. See your parenting journey from a spiritual lens and understand that you have got a third partner in your parenting. Besides for your co-parent, you have a divine couple, a mystical father up in heaven and a cosmic mother who are right there co-creating your child's life with you. And when you understand that you're not alone, but you have a divine partner guiding you as a parent, guiding your child, guiding your partner, co-creating together with this whole beautiful familial team, I hope this can help you rest, lean back a little, and understand you're not doing this alone. Of course, I'm inviting you to have support in your life. However, even in this small nuclear circle, God, your divine, ultimate partner and ultimate father and ultimate mother live with you, moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath. Trust your parental path. Trust your parental instinct. Trust your healing journey. And mostly, your child is destined to have their own journey that will include your imperfection, your mistakes, and your magnificence. If you want to learn more about the general notion of breaking generational cycles, you might want to watch this video on how not to repeat the same mistakes that you grew up with. I look forward to seeing you on our next video.